Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears, your masterclass in mechanical melancholy. We are here with the Prelude, and my God, we are almost there. We are almost back together after a long, long journey of tearing things down and rebuilding them. And for the past 2 weeks, our progress was actually held up because I was waiting on this. Yes, that's right. This is a single spacer for the fuel rail that was preventing me from putting the intake manifold back together and starting this car for the first time in almost a month. So last week we left off putting together the rest of the cooling system. We put the accessories on, we got the distributor and the cam angle sensor on and back together. Everything is ready to go except for the intake manifold, and because we were delayed, I decided to take the opportunity to put my stereo back together. I'm really happy I was able to do that because not only did I make the most of my downtime, but also this car is going to be so much more exciting when I do get it back out on the road. I'll get to really enjoy the car for the nostalgia and for all of the things that the car does for me, having owned it for 20 years since really I was a teenager. So here's the fuel rail, and you see I have 1, 2, 3 of the spacers, but I was missing just 1. So I found all but 1. I actually ordered 2 because at the time I was missing 2, and I found 1 while I was waiting. So kind of sad that I couldn't find the other one, but that's okay. We are able to go back together with this one. So I know you can technically put the intake manifold back together, and then I could have just slipped this back in with all of this already assembled, but that really isn't going to do anything for me because it doesn't take that long to put the intake manifold back together. I don't think that putting the intake manifold back together first would have really saved me that much time, because technically I know I could have still put the spacer in, but the reality is that the intake manifold doesn't really take all that long to put back together. It's not that complex, and it's really kind of plug and play. There's not a whole lot you can screw up unless you're really just not paying attention at all. So I don't think I saved myself that much time. I did save myself ass pain. I really believe that, because by putting this in, I can follow the natural order of operations to get this done, bolted down, and then I can start assembling these pieces the way they need to go together. Mainly because this thing blocks the bolt to the fuel rail. So now I can put everything all back together comfortably without having to worry about digging in through stuff, and this is just a better way of doing it. So I'm trying really hard not to get too excited about this, but this is pretty exciting. Obviously, nothing is bolted down yet. None of the coolant lines are hooked in. All I did was I put the gaskets down, put the butterfly plate in, and the plenum back on. So I didn't really do a whole lot, but it sure looks nice. It sure looks like I did a lot. I can't wait to get this thing back together. And also, look at how clean it is. Is this the point where I need to buy a lawn chair and be that guy at the car show that sits around saying, "They don't make them like they used to. They don't make cars like they used to. Back in my day." Is that me? Is that going to be me? I mean, I know I steal lawn chairs, but maybe I have to go buy one for myself now. I should probably buy one for myself anyway, just because stealing lawn chairs is kind of a dick move. I know my big fancy radiator kit comes with all the tools to extract air from the system, but this is just a quick leak down check. It doesn't need to be very scientific, and all we really want to do is get some pressure in the system and make sure it's not losing pressure and forcing out water. We can use this bleed valve over here to get some of the air out of the system back here, and obviously by doing so we are also forcing more air into it. So it's kind of a crapshoot, but it is kind of helpful for getting some of the air out of the engine block. Aside from that, all we're going to do is just pump it up to about 10. I don't know if that's PSI or bar. It's probably PSI, and 0.7 bar. I can't tell. It's hard to read. We're just going to pump it up a little bit and see if it holds pressure, for one, and two, if there's any water seeping out from anywhere. Again, I'm using distilled water. It's nice and cheap, and which means if there's any kind of failure and I got to dump the system again, I'm not out $30 for a gallon of coolant. So it's been several minutes, and I've been all around the engine, and we are still holding right at 10. So this is really good news. This is a good sign that I don't have any leaks. One of the hard things about this car is that the cooling system is needlessly complex. So I really had to look at every single connection, and it's kind of tough because you have to look underneath the car. You got to look at really all of the points where a hose ends. Here, there, that stupid T-junction, the other stupid T-junction, all of the connections that don't make sense underneath the manifold. You got to look everywhere, and thankfully I don't see anything. There's no drips on the floor, which is also really good. And all signs point to good, so now I think we want to drain this distilled water, or at least drain the radiator, and start putting in our coolant mixture. But before we do that, we can actually start this car and run it on distilled water for just a small amount of time, just to see if everything else runs. And I think we're at the stage where we can do that. So if you'll notice, I've got the coil unconnected. I'm going to start this thing up, get oil circulating through the system first, and that'll also give a chance for any kind of catastrophic failure with my timing to reveal itself before I start the car up and try to drive it. I am so glad that I thought to check this before I tried starting the car, because I would have just sprayed fuel everywhere. When I was putting this together, I was not entirely sure if this connection needs the copper rings. I'm going to go look it up, and if it needs the copper rings, I'm going to go get them. That cost me $15. But it's genuine Honda. You're probably saying I'm an idiot for doing this, and you're not wrong, but there's a couple reasons why I wanted to get these from Honda as opposed to buying a generic set of mix and match copper washers. And, well, for one, I needed something today if I want to have a YouTube video for you guys this weekend. Number two, this thing, at least the lower washer, sits inside of this crown, which means that if it's the wrong size on the outer diameter, it might not fit. It might push against these little side posts here if it's too big. So I didn't want to risk getting the wrong size, especially considering I want to have this quickly. So let's put this on, and then we'll hopefully be able to start up this car. I swear I could write a Jeff Foxworthy special on owning a Prelude. If you do a major service and you end up with extra hardware, you might be a Prelude owner. So I don't expect a whole lot to happen from the inside of the car, so I'm going to keep the camera out here just in case anything goes flying or blows up or anything really spectacular happens, so you can see the failure before I do. Actually, that's not true because I still have to edit the video. No check engine light. 3, 5, 6. It's a strong crank. I'm just going to keep doing this until I get oil pressure. My oil light is still on. All right, now let's reconnect the coil and see if it starts. And if it doesn't start, that means I have to flip my fuel cutoff. Oh, for God's sake. All right. It runs. It runs. So I'm getting quite a bit more vibration from these motor mounts because they're solid polyurethane. I'm getting a weird lag when I blip the throttle. All right, that's enough for now. Well, that was a huge success. I'm really, really grateful that it started up and ran. There was a little bit of a weird lag when I blipped the throttle. It stayed open longer than I thought. It could be a vacuum line that I missed. It also could just be related to the idle control valve because I need to bleed the coolant system. And by the way, I have still distilled water in here, so I need to put coolant in here. The next thing I want to do is I probably want to run it for a couple of minutes with this distilled water in here just to see if it leaks. I also want to check underneath the car to see if there's any oil leaks. I do feel some more vibration inside the car, and that's definitely because of these solid polyurethane motor mounts. That's just going to have to be something that I live with. That's the reality of solid polyurethane mounts. I've got a couple of connectors that I think I might be able to find a home for, but otherwise, so far so good. It didn't blow up. I didn't bend all my valves, so this is really, really exciting. A whole lot of things just went right. That's what this tells me. There's still a whole lot that could go wrong, but a whole lot of things went right. I did a lot right. Okay, so next up, let's start this car and run it for a couple of minutes. I don't want to run it for too long because it's distilled water and not coolant. I don't want the water to boil. So obviously I'm not going to run it for a long time, but that's supposed to be one of the things that coolant's supposed to help with. And also I got to clean up around here. I've got all that extra hardware and stuff and trash on the car. Started filling up the fluids. I started with the radiator. I drained out the distilled water and put actual coolant in here. I also decided to fill up the power steering fluid because it's not a good thing to run your power steering system dry. First things first, you want to make sure you're using Honda power steering fluid, nothing else. And if it's Honda power steering fluid, it doesn't necessarily need to be from Honda, the factory, but it does need to say on the bottle, Honda power steering fluid. See, here it says for Honda vehicles. You don't want to use anything else or it'll destroy the seals in your rack. Next thing you want to be aware of is make sure you do not run your system with air in it, because that's what happens. And so the first thing you want to do to get that air out is when you start the car up and you fill the reservoir, you turn the wheels back and forth a whole bunch of times. And you just keep doing that, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, probably at least a good 30 times. And you're going to see this. And so what happens is those air bubbles, if they stay in the system, they're actually going to get in your pump and into your rack, and you're going to cavitate the metal in the pump. And you're going to ruin the pump, you're going to ruin the rack, you're going to ruin the lines. So you want to make sure that you get this thing full. So now that I have got the party started, obviously I need to add more. And I need to keep doing that until I can maintain a full level without any foam at the top. So I'm going to go buy more fluid, and we're going to keep this experiment going. As far as the coolant goes, I'll show you what I do to bleed the coolant when the time comes. This is going to be a much quicker process, and the car doesn't really need to be warmed up in order for that to happen. The car does kind of need to warm up because you want the thermostat open so that you get all of the air out. So we're going to work on that in just a minute. Well, I've got multiple leaks from the power steering system. So there's obviously a big one right there. I've also got another one right here, probably coming out of the reservoir. This one's I think is going to be pretty easy to fix because it looks to be coming out of, ow, I just burned myself on the exhaust. It seems to be coming out of these two connections right here. It's definitely this hose. And I just don't like these hose clamps. So I'm going to take them off, and I'm going to put... Actually, I'm probably going to put double worm clamps on. Replace those. Just replace them entirely. Get rid of them.
With the most bespoke hoses in the world, the Honda Prelude delivers performance and reliability. Because bad performance is still some kind of performance, and unreliability is a subset of reliability.
Seriously, who would have thought that you can't use a regular size hose to replace a hose on a car? Like, why did Honda do this? Why did they do this? Why did they do this? This hose is just a little bit too big because the other size was just a little bit too small. So I'm just totally screwed here. I'm just totally screwed here. This is not going to last. But whatever, it's the only option I have. And if it continues to leak, I just have to put another clamp on it. While we wait and see how bad this power steering system is going to leak, we're going to let the car, or at least try to let the car warm up, and we're going to bleed the coolant system. Now, the Prelude comes with a bleeder valve. It's located right here. You don't need to use that big fancy kit that I got. You certainly can, but you don't need to. All you have to do is run the car, and then you crack this bleeder valve. And once that starts to flow with a constant flow, that's when you cut off the valve. So let's get a wrench on it. And let's just open it up. Can't see this, but the coolant level just dropped by a lot. So let's get more coolant in this thing before it blows up. See, now we got some coolant coming out of the bleeder valve. I'm going to get ready to close it up. And that's starting to look pretty constant. I'm going to go ahead and close it up now, top off the radiator. I don't know what that noise was. It scares me. And then we're going to continue watching it. So that's actually pretty good. The steering fluid reservoir is a little overfilled. I might have to pull some out. But that's in general how you bleed the cooling system on the Prelude. You just got to keep doing that. The best thing to do is to actually just run a hose from here to here so that you're not draining out on the floor. But I didn't drain that much, and my floor's a mess anyway, so I'm going to mop it. So now that the car is all back together, the next thing we need to do is set the timing. If you have a real eagle eye, you're going to notice that my PCV tube is not hooked up, and that's because I lost the tube. It's a little bit tough because this output is a bigger diameter than this input, so I have to get a hose and stretch it out and make it work. All right, you see, I am very clearly not an eco-terrorist. Now I can drive this thing. You can have this thing disconnected all you want in the garage and on your private property, but once you take it out on public roads, you got to have that connected. You got to have all of your emissions equipment connected and working properly. Just saying, because I don't want to commit a crime on YouTube. So now we can legally drive this, but before we do that, I want to clean this car up. It's pretty filthy. It's been sitting for a month, and it was dirty before I parked it. All right, well, the car is cleaned up. I did drive it around the block, but I want to take it out on the freeway, make sure that it's fine driving in town, because I don't want to break down in the mountains. So we're going to drive it out to my dad's house in Sylmar, and I'm going to take a very special picture. And once we get out there, I'll explain it to you. I love the startup on this car now. I could probably stand to advance the timing just a touch because I set it without actually driving it around. bogging, but it's that I think it has a little bit more to give with just a little bit more of an advance. I'm willing to bet that if I drove it around... Oh, fuck, truck. Jesus Christ. Whew. Truck behind me. Pulled out into traffic. And now I have to race this truck to get up to speed. Actually feels pretty good. Wow, that was scary. Headed 60 miles an hour towards a semi-truck that's pulling out into traffic. Yeah, that was nasty. Kind of wish you had seen the other side of that video because it was scary. But at least you got to see the look on my face. Yeah, so what am I looking out for? Well, I'm looking out for how does the steering feel? How's the temperature gauge look? Oil. I mean, the car's running, and I did check the oil pressure. Not the oil pressure, but I checked for leaks. I checked the level. Everything looked good when I left. So I think once we get out to this house, we're going to take a look underneath the car, see if anything's dripping. And if that looks good, then I might just risk it. I might just go out into the mountains. So we're almost at the house, and I've been driving on the freeway for a bit. And, of course, now we're driving on the street. And I think the motor mounts was not a bad idea, because when you apply power, the car actually moves a little bit more gracefully. It moves a little bit more snappily, just a little bit. So I think at a stop, it sucks a little more. It's a little more rattly. It's a little more vibration-y. But when you're driving, it actually does feel a little bit better. So there is a trade-off, and I feel like the trade-off is actually a little bit even. If you can live with the vibrations at a stop, you're going to be happy with the benefit of the solid motor mounts when you're shifting gears, when you're nailing the throttle. You're gonna feel that just a little bit. It's not a lot. It's not gonna change your life. I would say if you have a high horsepower application, it's definitely worth doing. But even if you don't, it just depends if you're willing to live with a little more vibrations at a stop. This isn't that bad. This is livable, but it is also noticeable. But this just feels so much better. You're probably wondering, what's so special about taking a picture of a car in a garage? Well, that's because of the house that this car is in. I initially took this photo 20 years ago. 20? Yeah, probably. 2003? 20 years ago. When we moved into this house, me and my dad, and I was so excited to finally have a garage to work on my car. This is where it all started. And now this house is up for sale. My dad's gone. And I've done a lot of work to his house. So, in this garage, I learned how to wrench. In this garage, I did a lot of work on this Prelude and 2 other Preludes. And last year, I did a lot of work on this house. So, So it really is kind of special to me to be able to come back here and to park it here one last time. This also gives me an opportunity to check for leaks, which there are none. That is so cool. I have not been able to say that about this car for a decade. All right, well, I have to come back here later with the Jeep and do a little bit of cleaning and bring some more gravel for the side of the house, so that means we need to get out of here. Let's go for a drive in the mountains. That's gonna wrap it up for this video, and man, am I happy about it. I am so happy I got this car out on the road, and I am so happy that it just runs as good as it does. I have 150 miles left before I reach 300,000 miles, and I probably am going to just record that as a short. I don't think that's enough to justify its own video. So I'll do a short for you guys, and I'll post it up on YouTube as I cross this 300,000 mile threshold. But until then, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. It was a rough road getting here, but like I said, it is worth it. This car is worth it, and I am so happy. In fact, when I stopped at Newcomb's Ranch, I was actually talking to a guy that was parked there. He had an old Accord. I think his name was Ryan, and we were just talking cars, and he was saying that he thought it was really cool that I held onto this car for as long as I did, and that is a really, really big inspiration for me to keep this going. Just the fact that that the perception around this car has changed. It is no longer something that I am the only person in the world that likes, but other people are finally recognizing that, and I'm seeing that with the views on YouTube. I'm seeing that with the attention I get at car shows, and it is so cool to be a part of that, to feel like I held on to something because I loved it when no one else, or at least it seemed like no one else did, and now it's catching on as something that is really, really cool, and people are seeing it for kind of the way I see the car. So again, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, comment. If you don't like what you see, leave a comment. Let's talk about it. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I got a car on my tail, and I have either got to speed up or pull over. I haven't decided which I'm going to do yet. Thank you, and I'll see you next week. I've got something really, really crazy